Today we are going to be learning a little bit more about glazes or just get a refresher in general. So we're going to talk about layering glazes, creating variety and using different techniques just to get a more interesting surface. So I just want to talk about the consistencies of glazes once they are fired. So there's transparent and high gloss, which gives you a very high sheen. It looks like glass is on the surface, and you can see right through the glaze. Okay. It will accent all textures. So if you have a lot of texture on your surface, it can be very beautiful. However, if you have a lot of imperfections or your craftsmanship is poor, it will also show those very well. So you kind of have to judge how to use these. So sheer, satin, semi-transparent are all kind of in the same category, which basically means the colors are a bit more richer. They have a creamier looking finish. They still have a gloss to them, but they're not such a high gloss. It will accent most textures, but if there's a really faint texture, it can sometimes cover those up. Opaque is, for example, those taller bottle, these stroke and coat glazes, and many of these foundation glazes that we have in our classroom are opaque glazes, which are glazes that are more solid in color and they don't have any variation to them. So they're kind of basic and they all come in, your all all colors. So you're going to see green, lime green, forest green, but again, they're all like a solid color. These can sometimes cover up your texture unless you're careful with them. For example, this piece, the texture is really apparent because that student went back in and cleaned the glaze out of those leaf veins that you see here. Whichever color is on top is going to show up most. You will still see like an underneath color, which that actually adds a lot of interest to the surface. So you can see here, like the overlapping of the glaze. This one, another one made by a student. You can see on the deer, the spots that are there. So, and then lastly, our underglazes. Um, Make sure the bottle says underglaze. They will. Basically, all underglaze is it's a colored clay. So there's a pigment added to a really fine clay body, meaning it doesn't have any grog in it. It's very smooth clay to start with. They are not glossy at all. They have a chalky finish or even the same surface as the clay, just a color. They are more painterly, meaning they don't run. You can easily blend them into other colors. And you can put this on clay that's been fired once. You can put this on clay that hasn't been fired at all yet. And usually do that when it's about leather hard. You can put a clear over top of any underglaze to make it glossy, but sometimes that matte finish with the gloss sheen kind of planned out can be a really beautiful variation of surface. So just a couple techniques. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about layering and variety. So any of the glazes that we have can be layered on top of one another to create a different surface. And sometimes we don't know what those surfaces are going to look like unless you do testing to them. So sometimes it's nice to experiment with those glazes first before you go ahead and do it. Sometimes it's nice to just have a good surprise. So obviously I have the crystal glazes. These can also be layered. and I have the textured glazes, and there's more over there than just this. This is called a black cobblestone, and it kind of looks like the crust of the earth. And it actually feels textured, not just looks like it. These are the glaze pen bottles that I have. Glaze pen bottles that I have, they're called designer liners, and they are underglaze. You can also buy just like empty bottles with a pen on it so that you can fill it up with any glaze color that you'd like. So we have access to all of these things. One thing that I do want to point out is that if these needles aren't put back through the tip of the glaze pen bottle, they get hard and dry up, and it's very hard to clean them. So it's super important that you put those back in there once you are finished. Okay, a couple more glazing techniques. So bubble glazing, wax resist, and an underglaze wash. So bubble glazing is actually really easy to do, but you can see the surface of the glaze. It looks a lot like bubbles, which it actually is. And you typically want to use an underglaze, and then once it has completely dried, you'll put a clear over top of it. And this video right here will show you, actually, I think it's just a website that walks you through the process. The next one is a wash, or sorry, an underglaze wash. So basically this, I don't have a video because they're doing it right here, is you paint the surface with whatever underglaze color that you would like, and then you take a sponge and wash it off. And wherever there is textured areas, it will stay in those parts. So if you look up here, the wash might not be wiped away quite as much as this one, but it really does give it a nice, beautiful, aged surface look. And then lastly, I have the wax resist. And basically, wax just makes it so that glaze cannot go to the specific area. So you can see this person they glaze their pot first, and then they put a wax resist in a specific area. And then what will happen is they'll probably glaze again on top. So this is the only area that would be this color glaze, and the rest of it would have another layer of glaze, so it would probably look very different. This is an example of what it can look like. There's lots of different possibilities. So I just also want to point out that glazes look different on different clay bodies. Okay, so just for an example, this is a dipping glaze that I have. It's a high fire glaze, but this is the same glaze on 3 different color clays. So we have the speckled clay, the white clay, and then the dark, like chocolate brown clay on these birds. And this is what the chocolate brown clay looks like without any glaze on it. And then these are examples of 2 low fire glazes, the turquoise on the white clay and the terracotta clay. And you can just see the earthiness of the terracotta peering through on that. So just want to give you guys a refresher, bisque and low fire glazing. So a bisque firing is the first firing you do when you want to turn clay into ceramic. And it gets up to about 1817 degree or 70 degrees, so very hot. And the 2 clays that we have here at school that are low fire are the gray, also turns white once it gets fired, and the terracotta clay. So this temperature is also what we use for the second firing process if you're using low fire clay and low fire glazes, which that is absolutely necessary, the process that you use. There are endless possibilities. If you've been in here, you've only touched the surface of all the possibilities you can achieve. So we do have these artist choice glazes. And those ones have a lot of variety in them. They tend to look more like high fire glazes. Whereas we also have the Mako is the brand name, foundation and stroke and coats. Those are going to be your more solid colors. This was either done with underglaze or the more solid glazes and just the pen, so drawing the outline in that black, but just adding a lot of variation, overlapping the glazes here and this surface, also in the flower areas, but like really getting an interesting surface there. So high fire glazes. So if you click on this website, it is going to take you to their website and it will show you every glaze with the potter's choice. It'll show you here if you wanted to download that. Show you some examples in video form. Show you what it looks like at different layers. So like if you just add 1 or 2 or 3. And I do have a lot of these glazes over on the other side of my room, my main room. What's also really cool is if you scroll all the way down here, Potter's Choice layering, you can see what these glazes look like when they are layered on top of each other. And I do have some of these sheets over on the other side inside of the glazing cabinet, but I don't have all of them. And you can just jump on this website and check them out because, again, these possibilities are endless. So these glazes get to a hotter temperature, so they are more melty. They tend to have a lot more variation, but they get to about 2150 degrees. So these glazes can only be used with high fire clay. They absolutely cannot be put on low fire clay. So our high fire clays that we have here, the white clay, the chocolate brown clay, and the speckled clay. Again, hundreds of possibilities. There's so much variation. You don't just have to do the layering that you see on these sheets. You could do like 3 different types of glaze layered on top of each other, which this is an example of some of the glazes that we have layered over top of one another. And this is probably only this is probably only 2 or 3 glazes. This is a quick video that just shows you an artist glazing her piece and showing you the whole process and at the end what it can look like. So you can create value and gradation with glazes. I would say it's definitely easier to have those more opaque glazes or solid color glazes when you are doing this. In terms of the gradation value, you can do with anything, but whenever you have textures, those dark colors typically recede and the light colors create the highlights and push forward. Some of the glazes do that automatically for you. So if you look at the texture on this piece, it's somewhat challenging to see, but like where it's deeper, the glaze builds up and gets darker. So gradation, that's just that visual technique where you go from light to dark. So this example here is really nice, starting with like the black or dark blue, also and gradating to a light blue. This is a very smooth transition. That's not always that easy, but it's okay if it's a little more choppy too. That can be just as beautiful. So glazing is such a big part of the process. It's the finishing touch. Um, and it's really important that you finish your piece well. So a couple glazing rules I just want to remind you. So apply 3 coats for an even well finish. If you're layering, sometimes you'll do 3 to 4. Never, and if you're going to do 4, you would keep the glaze more towards the top of the piece so that if it does run, it's not going to cause issues in the kiln. You're never going to glaze the bottom unless it's approved by me, which that's kind of rare. And you're always going to wipe it clean with a sponge. Even if you think you got none on the bottom, it always happens. Just turn it over. Even on the very edge of the bottom, it needs to be completely wiped off. So to mix the glazes, make sure the lid is tight on the bottle and shake the glaze bottle to mix it. If it's not on there well, you go to mix it, the lid flies off. It can cause a crazy mess and be a waste of the glaze, something that would just, empty the bottle out there. So please be mindful of that. The glaze consistency should be about the consistency of like a heavy cream. If it appears like it's really thick or even chunky, you can talk to me about it, and water will probably need to be added to it. Glazes are very expensive, so you have to be mindful of that and not waste them and use them appropriately. This glazing requirement, I'm not making this first one something you have to do, but I would like you to try, for your wheel piece you just made, to try something you learned in this video. And then, always focus on your craftsmanship and put effort towards it. I can't wait to see what you guys come up with. So lastly, I just want to remind you there's going to be a few questions, a worksheet that goes along with this slideshow, and I'm going to have you complete that and get it done before we return to school on Thursday. So it will be due on Wednesday. All right. Thank you guys for listening.